Arrays can be very useful, especially when you know upfront all of the data that you're going to store in the array, and then you know that every index will be filled with data and you have it all ready to use or to change from that point forward. However, sometimes you won't get all of the data up front, and you might still want to use an array to store the information as you get it, possibly to then report that information out or to modify the things that are stored in there. There are other data structures that can be used in situations where you don't know all of the data up front, but arrays are very fast to use and they're very standard. Many different languages have something equivalent to an array. So we're going to approach a problem where we aren't given all of the data up front and we want to use an array to still solve that problem. So here we're going to have an array of words or string input that the user has given us, and we're going to add things to that array, we're going to look things up, and we're going to allow for a command that reports all of the data that's in the array. First we need to create an array, and we're going to make our array have a size of 3, just for simplicity's sake. The other thing you'll need is to know where data stops in the array, where the last place is for data to be, or in this case, the way I'm going to frame it actually is where the next index would be that I would store something. Because this makes it easy so that I can say, when the array is empty, the next index that would be used is index 0. We would place the first item at index 0. So my array is set up. I have the string array here and the next index of where I'm going to put data. I've already set up a little while loop with some prompts for the user here. And the next task that I want to be able to do is to store the data in the array. Otherwise, we won't be able to look it up, or we won't be able to print out all of it, or things like that. The exit command with the exclamation point is already written here. First task would have to be to store things in the array. When I need to store something in the array, I would simply say that the array at next index becomes the thing I've read in, which I've called word here. And I then also need to make sure to increment the next index, add 1 to it, or otherwise I would keep adding things at index 0 over and over. This also allows me the chance to make sure that I don't go beyond the size of the array. Again, other data structures allow you to expand beyond the current set size. Arrays don't, so I need to make sure the next index is less than the length of the array, because we're not going to be able to store things at index 3, for example, only indexes 0, 1, and 2 in this array. So I'm going to say that next index has to be less than array's length, otherwise I won't input stuff, and in fact I'll report to the user that the array is full. Now that's set up, and I should be able to read data into the array. Of course, I have no way of testing or knowing this until I write the component that would look items up from the array. I've already got an if statement set up for that. If the user inputs an integer, then I'll read in that integer. Now let's use that integer. So here I could simply print out the item from that index in the array. Whatever value they've given me, I could print out that item. I might also want to make sure that the user is not giving me an index that's invalid for my array. For instance, greater than the last index that was used. So n must be less than next index. Much like we would normally do, n is less than the array's length. Well, here we don't know that the full array length has been used, so we have to keep n less than the next index that would be used. So this should allow me to enter data and to look up data, and it should stop me if I enter more than the amount of data that's allowed. First, second, third, the array should now be full, and so if I go to enter a fourth value, it reports to me that the array is full. And then if I tell it I would like the item at index 2, that should be the word third, 1 is second, and index 0 is first, and it doesn't allow me to enter values. It just does nothing in that case. I could also output an error, but I don't. The last thing we want to be able to do here is to loop over all of the data that's in that array to be able to report it all to the user when they use the star command. So I can set up a normal for loop here. The only real difference between the way I would typically loop through an array and the way I'm going to do it here is instead of I being less than the array's length, again, I have to use next index and say that it has to be less than the next index that would be used. This will stop it from reporting out the empty spots in the array, which in this case would be equal to null. It's not very kind to print null for your users. So I print out array at index I, and that would allow me to print all of the values in the array. We can test it and run and see. We'll enter first, second, third. We know it would stop us if we tried to enter a fourth. So I use star, and we see it printed out first, second, third, all right on their own lines there. And I still can look up values that exist within the array as well. So this basic structure of setting up your array, but tracking what the next index would be that you would use from it, allows you to do things like read in a varied amount of data to that array, to look up items at particular indexes within that array, and to loop over but only use the indexes that have actually been filled within the array. We could also use it to modify values and make sure that the indexes being modified are ones that already have a value, or use it in general. Any way that we would use a filled array, this next index variable allows us to see where to stop.